And in Syria and Iraq, the US military says a number of coalition airstrikes have killed 10 leaders of the Islamic State group, including individuals linked to the attacks in Paris in November. A spokesman for the campaign, Colonel Steve Warren, said one of those who died was Charaffe al-Mouadan, a Syrian-based member of IS with direct links to the Paris ringleader. Colonel Warren said al-Mouadan was actively planning further attacks against the West. He said an airstrike in Mosul killed another IS leader with connections to the Paris attackers, Abdul Qadir Hakim. Well, we got in touch with Kyle Orton. He's a Middle East analyst, and I asked Kyle where he thought the US military was getting this intelligence.
It's almost certainly taken from the raid that killed the leader of the Paris cell, a man called Abdelhamid al-Abaaoud, in late November. And there's also documents that were captured in May during a raid in Syria. And they seem to have fed out a number of important pieces of information because the gentleman who was killed was a sort of center of a web. He wasn't himself all that important, but he was connected to a lot of people within the organization. So he had information on them that's been relatively useful ever since. So it's looking at captured data, so it'd be flash drives, laptops, perhaps phone books, written notes, that kind of thing.
That kind of thing. And I notice you're saying it's not all that important, so possibly as important as being overstated.
I think so. 5 of the people killed, 5 of the 10 killed between December 7 and December 27 are external operations people, and they're kind of less important generally within ISIS. Some of them, like al-Mouadan, who, because he had a French connection, may be seen as a bit more important, and he's certainly seen in the Western world as a lot more threatening because he can pass more easily in security and things, and he'll have better local knowledge. But it's the external wing of ISIS is, in a sense, not where their focus is. And so when these people get rounded up, ISIS in general can replace its members very easily. It's built institutionally, so it's not built around individuals. But that's especially true in the external operations part of their network. The other person that was killed, who it's not clear his nationality, but Abdul Qadir Hakim is the other one who's been played up, who was linked to the Paris cell. But it's not entirely clear what his role in that was either. But he was almost certainly somebody who can be quite easily replaced.
Right, and someone else was described as a UK-educated Bangladeshi computer systems engineer. He sounds like a useful character.
Yes, his name was Siful Haq Sujan, and he was a hacker for ISIS, and he seems to have been involved in their counter-surveillance program to stop us being able to spy on their communications. And he does seem to have had some kind of specialist planning capacity in their external operations. And another man called Rawan Tahir, who was a facilitator and seems to have had some command and control responsibility and to have been involved in the transfer of money and weapons for ISIS. Those two seem quite important, and quite tellingly, both of them were killed in Syria, whereas the other 8 people were killed in Iraq. And Syria has long been ISIS's center of gravity, but unfortunately a lot of the coalition effort is disproportionately focused on Iraq.
We have, of course, been hearing about the fall of Ramadi, and yet we know that IS are somewhere else. Is it possible to identify an IS headquarters?
Yes, their headquarters is clearly in Raqqa in northern Syria. That's where the majority of their fighters and their resources are. That's where they're most dug in, and it's innocent. It's also spiritually and symbolically their most important base. Their most important base in Iraq is Mosul. And the fall of Ramadi it's important in the sense that it's rolling back an outlying area that they managed to take in May. But that's, in a sense, that shows you the problem is that it was a major blow to the anti-ISIS coalition for ISIS to take Ramadi in May. And it's taken 7 months just to get back to where we were, which was a very bad situation in April, May time.
So given where we were in April and May and where they were in April and May, are things better now from a coalition point of view?
The judgment would have to be mixed. I mean, ISIS is said to have lost 14% of its territory, according to a study by Janes, IHS, and so that's important in a way, and with Ramadi that percentage would presumably go up. But it also depends on where you start from. So a lot of the territories they've lost, like in Sinjar and in northern Syria, these are Kurdish areas a lot of the time, or as in Ramadi, the outlying frontier zones of their stateless. So The losses are important, and if they can be built on, they can be made to be strategic defeats, but at the moment they are just tactical. The more important one at the moment is al-Abaaoud in northern Syria and Aleppo. If that fell to the Kurdish and Arab forces of the Syrian Democratic Forces, that would be more significant. But Ramadi is, in a sense, a correction for the coalition starting behind after Ramadi fell in May.
And of course, we're hearing from the Americans. What weight are the Russians bringing to this now in their attacks on people like the rebel groups?
The Russians have very, very seriously damaged the effort against ISIS. In the first 2 or 3 weeks of their campaign, they bombed hundreds of rebels in Aleppo and allowed ISIS to take territory that ISIS had been held out of for 2 years. And since that time, Russia has gone after basically everybody but ISIS. And at the same time, they're consolidating an intelligence cell in Baghdad and apparently engaged in outreach to the Sunni tribes, which the coalition would need to defeat ISIS. So Russia's focus is on maintaining the Assad dictatorship and on displacing American influence in the region, not on destroying ISIS. They would probably go after ISIS eventually to allow Assad to stabilize his regime, but only after they destroyed all the other groups and could say to the West, you'll have to work with Assad because there's no other interlocutor on the ground.
Kyle Orton, you may well be working your way through